So let's talk very specifically about the dialectical perspective. You got a little preview of it, but this one is going to be just devoted specifically to it. Videos, the way that I post them, can only be so long, and I like to have them more topical so you can review anything if you'd like to hear about it, or you know what specific content the video is going to be about. So we talked about the developmental model in depth, and I gave a teeny preview of the dialectical perspective, but I'm going to build on that and let this be a standalone about the dialectical perspective. So again, dialectics are oppositional forces that we have, desires for two things at the same time that don't make sense because they are truly opposite. We call them diametrically opposed. It's another way of thinking about dialectics. But within our relationships and as individuals, we experience these at two different levels. We find out that as an individual, I'm being pulled multiple ways and I don't have the same desires for these dialectics consistently. It changes situationally, it changes with our mood, it changes depending upon how hungry we might be, it changes because of emotional contagion and all sorts of situations. So it's something that is constantly in flux, and we need to recognize what is making us not pleased with the situation. When we're feeling an tension, what is the core of that? And that, again, is how the dialectical perspective can really help us better understand what's happening in relationships, so we know what to address. We know the types of conversations that we can have, and we can engage in having conversations directly about this element of our relationships. So the first dialectic is that of connection versus autonomy. Again, do you want to be together with someone a lot, or do you need a little bit more alone time? Just think of it in those terms. How often does it change? What do you want in a relationship? So that's your preference. What about other people? They also have this internal desire. Do they want to be more connected, or do they want a little bit more space? Where's the compromise? That's what we can do. We can figure out what the compromise might be. It's almost a negotiation process. Again, thinking of perspectives. What is the desired approach? In your mind, you are creating that as what you want to do. It might be different than another person's desired approach, and you actually have to go through that negotiation process and say, okay, what does this look like? What are the elements of an approach that makes me happy? How much is enough togetherness? How much is enough autonomy? And like I said, it's not going to be the same every day. It's something that I am very honest about within my relationship, is that, I'm a little bit clingier and needier this week than usual. And when I call, I need to just have your voice there. Again, I need the richer message, because texting isn't going to be enough for me right now, because I just need that support. And it's valid. We can expect these things. But if we can let the other person know, especially if they're not feeling the same way, it's like, I just kind of want to be left alone a little bit more, let you figure this out. If you can be honest, say, I need more connection for these reasons. It's a really good way to be able to communicate about what's going on, and you can navigate a little bit differently from a more informed position. So the second dialectical perspective that we can look at is the idea that some people like routine, some people don't. And this is the dialectic between predictability and novelty. Do you like knowing what's going to happen? Do you like having set plans and schedules that essentially are routine? That's the idea of predictability. Novelty. Do you like something new happening? Do you like exploration and discovery? What do you value more in a relationship? This is something that I experienced in my last relationship. I was dating someone who really, really valued a lot of predictability. I mean, there was supposed to be a Saturday routine and a Sunday routine when we were both, free from our typical work demands. And he wanted to be very, very aware of what it is we are going to do. It wasn't even a conversation that we had to have in his mind, because we're going to do what we always do on the weekend. And I am not wired the same way. I hadn't been living in this area all that long either, and I love discovery and exploration. He hated exploration because to him it was just a lot of work without a whole lot of reward. For me, I viewed it the other way, where it's just a little bit of work. There's joy in the journey is probably something that I would say, and just knowing more and having different options because I lived here completely made it worth all of the effort. And it was interesting. This is something that we actually had to talk about very specifically. I sometimes hate that I can go into relationship counselor mode in my own personal relationships, but this was one where I said, okay, I recognize that we have different ideas of what the weekend should be, and we need to be able to find a place where we both get what we want and what we need, what's going to be fulfilling for us within this relationship. And instead of just coming up with a schedule where we alternate weeks, or on Saturdays we do this, on Sunday I get to surprise. We didn't do that. What we did was come up with an approach that was predictable to a certain degree, but also involved discovery. So for me, one of the things that we like to do was just find different breweries in the area, and that was predictable. It was something that we both like to do, and what was new and novel in this to me was finding new ones instead of going to those that we've already been to before. It's like, okay, on Saturday we're going to check out a brand new brewery. So I got to have the novelty, and he saw it as predictable, and it was a really, really perfect compromise. Even though, as I mentioned, I'm not in this relationship anymore. So there are ways that you can actually work through these and find those positions where either the issue isn't important, or it can be win-win, or there's truth in both positions, sort of thing. It's almost an application of the pillow method, if you were wondering where the language came from that I was just using. So the other way that we can think about dialectical tensions. This one is openness versus privacy. How much are you supposed to share with someone, and how much do you expect other people to share with you? Again, this is all about self-disclosure and access to information. For me, the most telling element within a relationship as to how open people want to be or how private they want to be is access to a cell phone. Do you have it locked down? Are there things on your phone that you just do not want to share with someone else? You don't have to. I'm not saying that openness is always going to be the right approach in a relationship. What you want to do is make sure that you and the other person agrees about what degree of openness and privacy is appropriate in the relationship. And what do you do when you don't think the normal rules are going to apply, or if somebody has violated the shared understanding of where you want to be on this spectrum between openness and privacy? This one can be tricky, and it can really, really generate a lot of conflict in relationships. But what you can do a little bit differently in trying to resolve the conflict is recognize what the origin of that conflict is. Instead of treating the symptoms or getting to the habit like, oh, you always do this, or you're so secretive, have specifics and try to recognize why what you perceive is something that is too secretive and somebody else might think it's too open. It can happen with openness also. Think about things that happen within a relationship that you think are just going to be shared between you and the other person, but it is shared beyond the relationship. Somebody is open with other people regarding stuff that you thought was private to you. You need to set up parameters. You need to be able to have conversations to have a shared understanding and meaning of what privacy and openness is going to look like in a relationship. Otherwise, It's going to create more and more conflict, and it might affect where you are on the developmental scale also. So that is the second model of communication regarding relationships. Again, it's not specifically relationships within communication only. It's relationships at large, but there are so many things that are in these models that very specifically do require and relate to communication in general.